Hi, welcome to another episode of Remote Art Talks.
Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Maya Skarzenski. Maya is a Toronto-based multidisciplinary artist, fusing together painting, textiles, and photography. She is currently in her final year at OCAD University for drawing and painting, and her work explores the intersections between the abject and the beautiful. Hi, Maya.
Hello.
Hello, how's it going?
It's good. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Good, getting through it, staying home. So you create work that spans across a range of different mediums. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've been working on lately?
Yeah. So I guess the past year I've been working a lot on my textile practice, predominantly my soft sculptures. So I've been making pillows that are sort of fleshy but playful. They're actually sort of representations of creatures, um, worm-like creatures that I like to call wonks because they're wonky. Um, and yeah, they're very self-contradictory. I think of them as both like symbiotic creatures, friendly creatures, but also parasites and sort of insidious um, monsters that are sort of hiding in the shadows.
So what exactly, I'm looking at the images of it, and it's kind of interesting because they're in these really like bright, colorful, almost like optimistic and bright colors. But then when you describe what you're describing, it sounds a little bit like morose as well. Was there like, I guess, like, where did you come up with the idea of this, or like what kind of feelings brought you to this point where you were creating this kind of work?
Um, Honestly, my own ambivalence. So I started out just sort of like painting. I wanted to like work on painting more fluidly. I find when I first started like painting, I was making like very uh sharp shapes, a lot of squares, rectangles, very geometric, and I want to break out of that. So I just started painting squiggles, and they looked super different from everything else that was going on in my work. So I kind of like imagined them as like creatures that had moved on to my paintings. And I got kind of obsessed with that idea, and I turned them into sculptures. And I couldn't make up my mind as to whether or not they were like evil creatures or good creatures. Um, and sort of every time I started a new project, I had like a new story about them.
Right.
And yeah, I find people have very different reactions to them, especially because I've started like tying them together in more and more aggressive ways. So I find that sometimes I show them to people and they're like, oh, this is so fun. Like, I want to play with them. I want to touch them. I want to do something with them. And then other people would look at them and they're like, this is like kind of gross. Like, they look kind of gross. They're like these kind of fleshy tones. Like, some of them are like almost skin tones, but they're not realistic enough to like look like anything. So it's kind of, I think it has that uncanny effect.
Yeah.
And then the tying and like the compression of it, people seem to like really react to and respond to. And I like both reactions equally. So I've kind of been trying to work with both of them and like work between like their ability to comfort and discomfort people.
I really love that. I mean, like, I think, this sort of crosses over into more like personal tastes for art, but I tend to gravitate towards work like that too, where it's aesthetically pleasing, but there is something like not necessarily disturbing about it, but it's not all butterflies and roses. Like if you looked at it long enough, you're like, I feel a bit like uneasy. And looking at some of these soft sculptures, and I think also like looking at the titles of some of the work, like you see it, and someone who might look at it thinking that it's, like you say, something like positive and optimistic, but then the title has the word abattoir in it, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh no. But yeah, I think they're great. They're really neat. I would love to see them in
Mm-hmm.
person one day.
Thank you.
Once this is all over, when we're not like hiding in our houses. So on that note, you're not at your studio right now, but can you maybe describe, like, do you usually have a studio outside of your home, or do you work at home?
I prefer to work at home. I used to have a studio, but I really enjoy working at home, um, because I can kind of I can sew whenever I feel like it. I can like hang out with people and work on my projects, or I can like watch a show or a movie or something. Um, so for me it's easier. I like being in my own space. I like being um sort of more relaxed, uh which I have a lot more trouble with when I'm in a studio. And sometimes I find I'm a little less productive if I'm at a studio, because then I don't know, I can't get into it the same way that I do when I'm at home.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's, for most people, it's almost like the reverse. Usually people say the reverse. I know I'm the same thing, like, but the opposite. Like, I have a hard time working at home. I need the external space to focus. But yeah, that's great that working at home seems to be like the best space for you and your practice.
Mhm.
Cool. So, I mean, since you're not in your studio right now, is there anything that you're doing? Like, are you continuing to work on your practice during this time, or are you doing other stuff to, quote unquote, like stay inspired or what have you?
Yeah, I'm still figuring it out. But I couldn't really take all my materials with me because I've just moved home um to sort of get away outside of the city.
Hmm.
Um and lately I've been doing a lot of gouache painting,
Ooh,
which
great.
is like completely different from everything else.
Mhm.
I don't know how long it's gonna last, because literally right before this I was looking at where I could buy fabric online. um but yeah, I'm trying to work on my other skills as much as possible.
Mm,
I'm hoping to do more photography and more digital art. I'm really excited to experiment with some digital art, um, get back into 3D animation, and maybe work on like scanning my pieces and seeing how I can rework them digitally and see how that might work.
that's neat. So I guess like as someone who, I'm not an artist, but I,
Mhm.
appreciate art. It might be interesting for folks to hear about, like, when someone hears about a multidisciplinary artist, what's sort of like your philosophy about um, using all these different mediums? Like, typically when someone thinks about a traditional artist, they're just like focused on one thing, whether it's photography or painting. But I see that, like, with you, it's almost like your practice is about like the body of work and the different forms. I
Mhm.
mean, definitely please correct me, because you definitely know better, but do you want to maybe explain that a bit more?
Yeah. I guess when I first got into art, when I
Mhm.
first became like interested in art, um I was in high school, and I was really interested in like Dadaist work and some modernist work. And it
Mhm.
was generally like very mixed media, collage, anything goes.
Mhm.
And there was a Robert Rushtenberg quote that really struck me, and it's kind of been like I've been carrying it with me for as long as I can remember now. And it's all aspects of life are open to art. And so ever since then, I've always thought, like, how can this become art? How can this part of my life become art? How can this object be art? How can this moment or this feeling become like an artwork? And so originally I was really interested in performance art,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't really have the balls for it. I always got stage fright. It always freaked me out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I love performance artists, and I can't do it. I don't know. Um, yeah, and I think I was doing painting because um I don't know, like I enjoyed the medium. I liked the feeling of putting paint on a surface.
Mm-hmm.
Um and I felt like I couldn't really find my voice in that.
Mm-hmm.
Like my paintings didn't really say what I wanted them to say. And
Right.
so I kept adding more and more things. Um and so I don't have like a specific process for finding new materials or working with different materials.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've just kind of found that fabric for me really seems to, I don't know, like we just click. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to think about it too hard. I don't have to um like torture myself over it. I can just work with it, enjoy
Mm-hmm.
working with it and enjoy the outcome. And then whenever I start doing other things, it's more like I see other people being really good at their practice and their craft, and I'm like, I want to do that too.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
then I try to like learn another thing, and sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't.
Right. But I mean, I will say that, like, across the different sort of channels in which you've been expressing your art, you are actually like very good at all of them. I just saw your photography for the first time today as I was like, getting ready, and I was like, these are really good.
Thank you.
Maya, what can you not do? But that was interesting how you talked about painting not really getting across what you wanted, because from an outsider's point of view, I kind of see hints of that now too, like this effort in your paintings to make them three-dimensional somehow, or like go beyond just their flat surface, whether that was like me reading too much into it or not. But I'm like, oh, I can kind of see now like why yeah, like textiles and these soft sculptures yeah, really resonate with you, I guess. Okay, on to the next question. So I've read that you're inspired by different artists like Yoko Ono and Sheila Hicks, among others. So one can see some of their influence peeking through your work. What is it about these women or other women that have influenced your work, do you think?
Um, yeah, I think it's hard to say because
Hmm.
a lot of my favorite artists, I kind of like aspire to be like them, but I
Hmm.
feel like a lot of my work isn't like them that much. I think there are a lot of like I think my work is not too far off from like Sheila Hicks,
Hmm.
and even Eva Hesse. Um, but Yoko Ono really inspires me because she really activates the viewer,
Hmm.
and that's something I feel like I struggle with. But I'm still like trying to figure out how I can make my works more interactive, how I can like think about the viewer artwork relationship.
Hmm.
Um, she had a show at the Gardner Museum a few years ago,
Hmm.
which blew my mind. It was incredible. Um, and basically the viewers were the ones really making the work,
Hmm.
and it was all interactive, um, really really incredible. And I've been like every time I write about my inspirations and my work, I always reference that show. um, because I think the most important part of art is like how it makes us feel and how it makes us um, sort of think about our lives and think about ourselves.
Mhm.
And I feel like she kind of does that, and it's like inscribed into the kind of work that she does because she's like giving people instructions, but also like allowing them to make it their own.
Mm.
So I find that aspect really interesting. Even though it doesn't really come across in my work,
But it's
I'm
great to
still
have
trying to.
people that you like look up to or admire, or
Yeah, yeah.
like yeah, or doing something that you like are reminding yourself even as you're making it work to be like, okay, how can I try to like get the same or a similar reaction or something?
Mm.
Yeah. Um, are there any artists that you're following lately that people should know about?
Yeah, yeah, totally. Um, Paige Dottie, very cool OCAD artist. I'm obsessed with her work. I actually like bought one of her pieces recently, and oh my God, her work is like beautiful and just like very nuanced. You have to see it for yourself. Um, Other artists I really like, Jillian Tolliver, who
Yeah.
OCAD grad,
Yeah.
Shayla Ritchie, another OCAD grad.
Great.
Um, uh, what else? Sophia Opal, she
Uh-huh.
makes incredible work. Very mixed media, very experimental, super interesting. Um, Bethany Davis, she's her work's always transforming. Um, I find something like very comforting about her work.
Mm.
She does a little bit of everything. So, um, who else? Katerina Stambolik. She does these very cool, I want to say like acetate works.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I find them very inspirational. They're very plasticky. Um, yeah, just like absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, that's great. That's a great list. I'm sure people out there are probably jotting them down and looking them up on Instagram or what have you these days. And actually, on this note, with Okaju's GradX show that has initially was canceled and now is kind of, I guess, in conversation of potentially being postponed, or, like many other art fairs, are scrambling to find a solution without even knowing what the next few months are meant to look like.
Hmm.
How has that affected you, if at all?
Yeah. I'm supposed to be in GradX. Um, really looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Absolutely devastated that this is happening. Um, yeah, it's hard to say because it's like it's no one's fault really. Like it's canceled because of like for an important reason, to protect a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we really want to postpone it. I think the student body is pushing to reschedule it.
Yeah.
Um, but we don't know how realistic that is because no one really knows how long the social distancing is gonna last. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've been trying to figure that out, like looking at news, saying what their sort of projections are, and it's all over the map really. It's like 1 to 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
Anything could happen really.
Yeah.
Um yeah, it's hard to really figure out because I mean for a lot of OCAD students GradX is kind of how they find jobs, how
Yeah.
they like how people find them, how gallerists find them, how people like find their favorite artists. Like that's the start of your career.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's been talk of doing online things, but that's really hard to like
Yeah.
manage. It's not the same experience. It's not quite the same traction.
Yep.
So it's difficult. There's no like clear solution. There's like no one really knows what's going on. So
yeah, and things change so much day to day, week to week. I mean, I know that perhaps like the best that, I mean, us on the outside who aren't, you know, part of GradX, but are hoping that it can still happen as like attendees or enthusiasts, is that hopefully, you know, if all goes well, it can still go on, just happen at a later date, like a postponement, the same as what, you know, I'm sure, like you say, all the students are hoping for as well. So yeah, we're trying to keep optimistic, and hopefully their work, I know, you know, I can only imagine that they're working hard to try and find a solution now. Okay, on that note, it's now time for our rapid fire question round.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm gonna ask you 5 questions and you can just answer as quickly as you can, but obviously no pressure. Okay, what is your go-to snack?
Apples and caramel.
Nice. What is something that people don't know about you?
I feel like everyone knows everything about me. I guess I grew up on a farm.
Ah, okay. What music are you listening to these days?
Princess Nokia.
What is one vice that you wish you could give up?
All of them? Coffee. I think coffee.
Coffee. Freaking coffee, man. And last one, if you could be someone else for a week, who would that be?
I think like a random person. Like just like any, like just to see, you know? I'm always like, I'm very curious as to like how other people just like experience things, and I think everyone experiences things very differently, and we can't talk about it because it's so different for everyone.
Yeah, that's great. I love that answer. And finally, before we sign off, Maya, is there anything that people out there should know about, or how they could find you or support you, or take a look at your work, etc.?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Maya Skarzenski. I have my own website. I'm on Partial Gallery as well. I guess, yeah, I mean, I'm not really showing work now because no one is, but I'm really interested in doing like online collabs, or even just like artists talking to me. So I'm very, very like easy to contact.
Sweet. Well, thanks so much for joining us on Remote Art Talks, Maya. It was great chatting with you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, take care.
All right, ciao.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in. Follow this project using the hashtag #RemoteArtTalks, and make sure to follow our guest artists on Instagram.
Artifier is a Toronto-based platform created to help people discover how art can be fun. Go check out artifier.net or follow us on Instagram at artifiernet.
For artist followers of Remote Art Talks, Partial Gallery is offering a discount on pro artist plans. Partial is a curated online directory of noteworthy independent artists. Go to partial.gallery, create a free profile, and use the code REMOTE to get a 10% discount on your pro plan.